The sun hung low over the alien settlement, casting long shadows across the jagged rocks and metallic structures that formed the homes of the Kirin. It was a world that had survived far too many wars and disasters, a planet where survival was more than just a struggle. It was a way of life. For the Kirin, humans were myths, dangerous and unpredictable, the stories of their cruelty passed down like cautionary tales. The young Kirin woman, Lyra, tightened her grip on the doorframe, her heart racing as a sound broke the silence, a sound she had been trained to fear for her entire life. The door creaked open, and there he was, the human. His presence seemed almost too ordinary, a single man in a plain suit with a calm, measured expression, yet the moment he stepped inside, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. Lyra's eyes widened, and before she could control it, she shouted, "Mother, the human is here." Her voice cracked, echoing through the narrow room. Her mother, an older Kirin named Sela, appeared from the back of the house. Her large, expressive eyes narrowed in alarm, scanning the human quickly. Sela had seen humans before, or at least their shadows. The stories told of human invasions, human trickery, human lies. But this one, he didn't radiate menace. He didn't carry weapons openly. He didn't have the arrogance of a conqueror. Yet Lyra's fear seemed contagious, filling every corner of the room like a storm. The human raised his hands slowly, a gesture of peace he hoped they would understand. "I mean no harm," he said in careful, broken Kirin, words learned from painstaking study of their language and culture. "I'm here only to speak." She didn't move closer, didn't retreat. She just stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Her mother stepped forward, voice steadier than Lyra's, but equally tense. "Why are you here?" "I come to learn, to understand, and to help." Lyra finally found her voice, though it trembled. "We were told humans are dangerous. They take what they want, leave destruction behind. Why should we believe you are any different?" "But I am not here to destroy. I am here to help, to protect." The disaster had come suddenly, a collapse of the mining tunnels, a rupture in the energy grid, and it had trapped countless Kirin underground. The official story had been that humans abandoned the planet, that any human who stayed only caused chaos. But Sela remembered differently. She remembered a human who had risked his life to pull them from the rubble, to carry them to safety even as the tunnels shook and the energy grid faltered. That human had been a savior, though history had buried his actions under layers of fear and propaganda. Lyra noticed the subtle change in her mother's expression, but did not understand it. Fear still clung to her, a stubborn shadow. "I don't understand," she said, frowning. "If humans saved some of our people, why are they taught to be our enemies? But I promise you, I am not here to hurt anyone. If you allow me, I want to help in whatever way I can." "What if you are like the stories, waiting for the right moment to strike?" Lyra could feel her mother's hand lightly brushing her arm, a reminder to remain calm, to listen, to observe. Sela's gaze stayed fixed on the human, searching for truth in his movements, in the way he held himself, in the subtle signs that spoke louder than words. Then, without warning, a distant tremor shook the walls of the settlement. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. Lyra stumbled back, her fear reigniting instantly. "What was that?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The human stood immediately, scanning the room with sharp, attentive eyes. "A warning," he said quietly. "Something is happening outside, something that could endanger you all. I need your help, and you may need mine. Our people are strong. We survive disasters every year. You are not needed here." She wanted to run, to hide, to retreat into safety. But there was something in his voice, something in the calm, careful way he assessed danger that made her pause. She wanted to believe him. Maybe, just maybe, humans could be different. The tremor returned, stronger this time. Objects on the shelves rattled, and a low hum of energy surged through the walls. Lyra clutched at her mother's arm, eyes wide. "Mother, what's happening?" "Then let us prepare," he said. "I have knowledge and tools you have never seen, but together we can face this. We can survive and perhaps even thrive where others would fail." She realized that humans were not as simple as the stories said. They were unpredictable, yes, but not always dangerous. Sometimes they were exactly what you needed when disaster struck. As the tremors subsided and the house grew quiet again, the human turned to face the two Kirin women fully. "The choice is yours," he said softly. "You can stay in fear, or you can step forward and face what is coming, with me or without me. But know this, those who work together, those who trust in actions and not just words, survive in ways that others cannot imagine. We will see if your actions match your words." Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting an orange glow over the settlement. Shadows stretched long across the rocky terrain, but inside the small home, a fragile peace had taken hold. The human remained calm, a quiet anchor in the midst of fear, and for the first time, Lyra allowed herself to imagine that trust might not be impossible after all. And in that moment, the story of the human who had once saved her people, and of the one standing now in their home, began to unfold, not as a tale of fear, but as a tale of hope, of courage, and of the unpredictable strength of humanity. The human sat quietly in the center of the small Kirin home, his calm presence a sharp contrast to the still trembling young woman and her cautious mother. Lyra's tail flicked back and forth as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. She had seen fear in many forms, predators, storms, failures of machines, but this was different. This fear was woven into her life, taught to her before she could even walk. Humans were dangerous, everyone said, and yet here he was, unarmed, calm, even helpful. Her mother, Sela, cleared her throat, breaking the silence. Perhaps it is time you understand why our fear is so strong. Perhaps you need to hear the truth, not the stories taught in schools, but the truth we carry in our memories. Only then can I help. Not all humans are the same, Lyra, but some change everything they touch. The Kirin settlement had been thriving, mining resources, building homes, and preparing for the next generation. Then, without warning, a massive energy surge ruptured part of the city. Tunnels collapsed, structures crumbled, fires spread, panic swept through the colony. The scenes were chaotic, terrifying, and unrelenting. In the midst of this chaos, a human appeared. Unlike the humans Lyra had been taught to fear, this one moved calmly, efficiently, and without hesitation. He navigated collapsing corridors, lifting debris, helping Kirin families escape. He carried wounded children on his back, coordinated others to stabilize broken systems, and never stopped to consider his own safety. Every action he took radiated purpose and care. Lyra's eyes widened. This human saved them? She whispered, disbelief shaking her voice. Sela nodded slowly. Yes, that human risked everything for us. Even as our records say humans abandoned us, he stayed. Even as our leaders spoke of humans as threats, he worked to save lives. The official records erase the good deeds, but I wanted you to see the truth. Telling children that humans were dangerous kept them safe, or so they thought. I understand why you fear us. Stories of destruction, of unpredictability, of violence, they are not lies. Humans are capable of all of that, but fear does not define us. Actions do. I am here because actions matter more than stories, and now there is another danger coming, one that will not wait for stories to be corrected. What kind of danger? Her memory of the past human's courage gave her hope, but her caution remained. You ask us to trust a human after generations of fear, she asked. Yes, he said simply. Trust must start somewhere. I offer my actions, not my words alone. The human's eyes softened. Because the truth is visible if you look carefully. Look at the devices you keep, the equipment you maintain. You have survived using tools, planning, and cooperation. I am no different. I only bring experience from outside your world, from humans who learned to survive against impossible odds. Lyra looked around, noticing small things she had never paid attention to before. Old medical supplies carefully stored, tools repaired repeatedly, evidence of preparation and care. It was clear someone had helped them in ways that had been hidden, unrecorded in history. Sela spoke again, voice quiet but firm. That human, your predecessor, did not leave us to die. He saved us when no one else could. And perhaps it is time we learn the truth about humans from the ones who come now. The human reacted immediately, moving to stabilize the fallen objects, his hands steady and confident. That is what I mean, he said. The danger is coming and we must prepare. Gather everyone in the settlement who can help. Stabilize your systems, reinforce structures, and make plans for evacuation if necessary. Then we work together to survive. And the ones who care will risk everything for others, even strangers, even those who fear us. He was something else entirely, a protector, a teacher, a reminder that courage was more powerful than fear. Sela watched her daughter carefully. She could see the shift in Lyra's expression, the way curiosity began to replace terror. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Perhaps this was what the previous human had intended, to show them that survival, understanding, and trust were stronger than fear. Outside, the wind howled across the jagged terrain of the settlement. Dust and small debris swirled, reminders that their world was fragile, that disasters could strike without warning. But inside the house, a new plan began to form. Together, humans and Kieran could face what was coming. Together, they could survive. Lyra took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Then we will help," she said finally, voice firm though her hands still shook. The human nodded approvingly. "Good. First, we assess the damage, then we plan for what comes next. And remember, actions, not words, will save us all." Each instruction was simple, practical, and effective. Lyra absorbed it eagerly, her fear slowly transforming into focus and determination. As night fell over the settlement, the human finally sat down again, allowing Lyra and Sella a moment of rest. The house was quiet now, save for the soft hum of emergency systems and the occasional distant tremor. Lyra sat beside her mother, still absorbing everything she had seen, everything she had learned. "Do you think he really is different?" she asked softly. Sella smiled faintly, a mix of pride and hope in her expression. "I think he is exactly what the stories forgot to tell us. Humans can save just as they can destroy. And sometimes they choose to save. Not in words, not in promises, but in the undeniable truth of actions, actions that had saved lives before and that could save them all again." Lyra finally felt a sense of purpose, a flicker of determination. She was still afraid, but she was no longer paralyzed by fear. The human had shown her that courage could be taught, that hope could exist even in the darkest moments, and that survival was always possible when humans and Kieran worked together. The night stretched on, but sleep was slow to come. Lyra's mind replayed every image, every movement, every word. She could not ignore the undeniable fact. Humans could be heroes even in worlds that feared them. And as the stars twinkled above the alien settlement, the human's presence remained steady, a silent promise that the coming days would test them all, and that with courage, cooperation, and trust, they might just survive the unknown danger that loomed over them. The settlement had always been quiet at this hour, a fragile peace resting on careful routines and strict vigilance. But tonight the air carried a strange tension, a hum of unease that even the Kieran could feel. Lyra stood near the doorway, eyes scanning the dimly lit street outside. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the buildings, and every faint noise made her pulse quicken. She had spent her life fearing the unknown, fearing humans, fearing what she could not control. And now, in the company of the human who had entered their home, her fear had taken on a new form, an uncertainty tempered by the faintest flicker of hope. The human moved beside her silently, hands folded calmly behind his back. He did not flinch at the sounds, did not jump at the flickering lights or the distant rumble of machinery. Instead, he observed, calculated, and prepared. To Lyra, it was mesmerizing. Every step he took carried confidence, not arrogance, authority, not aggression. "What's happening?" she asked, voice low. "There is a disturbance in the settlement," he said. "I am not certain of the source yet, but it is spreading faster than normal." "What do you mean?" Her face was tight with worry, but she forced herself to appear composed. "We have seen tremors before. We have handled disasters," she said. "This is different," the human said firmly. "Those were isolated incidents. This is systemic. We need to identify the weak points immediately and reinforce them before it spreads further." She had grown up learning to survive earthquakes, storms, even minor technological failures. But never like this, never with a force that seemed to move invisibly, spreading chaos without warning. She glanced at the human, and for the first time she realized that fear alone would not keep them alive. Courage, skill, and swift action would. The three of them moved through the settlement, the human leading the way. He paused at a broken support beam near the main energy conduit. "If this collapses, it will trigger a cascade," he said. "We must reinforce it or evacuate the surrounding area immediately." She had never worked alongside a human in this way, had never felt the strange blend of tension and trust that came from following someone who knew what to do. Each action, each command was precise and deliberate, and for the first time, she realized humans could be trusted to lead when the situation demanded it. As they worked, the settlement around them began to stir. Other Kieran emerged from their homes, drawn by the tremors and the unusual presence of a human among them. Murmurs spread quickly and fear returned in waves. "Why is a human here?" one elder asked, voice shaking. "Why now?" "Only preparation, courage, and cooperation will save lives." Slowly they began to assist, following the human's instructions to stabilize the structures and assess the power systems. Lyra worked beside them, her fear giving way to focus. She saw the human's methods, organized, efficient, and precise, and realized that humans could be heroes not just in legend, but in reality. The tremors grew stronger, shaking the ground beneath them. Dust and debris fell from the ceilings, and small fires ignited from damaged energy conduits. Panic threatened to overtake the group, but the human remained calm, directing them with a steady voice. Keep moving. Focus on what you can control. Reinforce the supports, check the energy lines, and stay alert for signs of spreading damage. She had learned quickly from the human, absorbing his instructions and applying them without hesitation. She worked alongside others, guiding them, helping them see that fear was not the answer. The human's presence had transformed their response from chaos to coordination, from panic to action. Hours passed, the sun setting beyond the horizon. The settlement was still under threat, but the immediate dangers had been contained. The tremors subsided for a time, allowing the Kirin to regroup and catch their breath. Lyra leaned against a support beam, exhausted but alive, and looked at the human. You really do know what you're doing," she said, awe in her voice. The human nodded, though he did not smile. "I know enough to keep you alive. That is all that matters. You have all shown that tonight as well. Fear is natural, but bravery is choice." She felt a spark of pride, mixed with a growing realization. Humans were not just unpredictable monsters as she had been taught. They were capable of extraordinary things that could save lives even on a planet that feared them. The human moved to the edge of the settlement, scanning the horizon. "There is more coming," he said. "I do not know exactly what, but I can feel the signs. We must prepare for a longer crisis, and it may spread beyond what we have seen. Those are the keys to survival." Fear had not disappeared entirely, but it had been transformed into alertness and determination. As the hours passed, the human finally allowed himself a moment to rest. He observed the Kirin, noting their resilience, their willingness to follow instructions, and the small signs of trust beginning to grow. They were not fully convinced, not yet, but they were moving in the right direction. And that was enough for now. Lyra sat quietly, thinking of the past, the present, and the future. The memory of the human who had saved her people years ago blended with the actions of the one standing beside her now. It was a continuity of courage, a legacy of bravery that transcended generations. She realized that fear had shaped much of her life, but it did not have to control it. Actions, she understood now, mattered far more than stories or warnings. Outside, the wind carried a low, steady hum, and the distant tremors reminded them all that danger was far from over. But inside the settlement, a new sense of purpose had taken hold. Humans and Kirin, once strangers bound by fear, were now allies in the struggle for survival. They were preparing for whatever came next together, with trust slowly building where suspicion had ruled for generations. The human looked at Lyra and Sela. "Tomorrow, we continue," he said. "We must assess more areas, reinforce more structures, and ensure everyone knows their role. The settlement depends on coordination. If even one area fails, it could affect everything else. We will follow your lead. We will act as you instruct. Courage, knowledge, and action, these are what keep life alive." And tonight she had seen that choice in action, in ways that words could never fully capture. As the settlement settled into an uneasy sleep, the human remained vigilant, watching the horizon, anticipating the next tremor, the next sign of danger. And Lyra, lying awake beside her mother, felt something new within her, a spark of hope, a sense that survival was possible and that humans, whatever the stories said, could be heroes in ways that even legends could not fully describe. Tomorrow, she thought, they would face the next challenge. But tonight, they had learned that courage, trust, and cooperation could overcome even the deepest fears. And that knowledge, she knew, would carry them farther than fear ever could. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged horizon, painting the settlement in a soft orange glow. The Kirin moved cautiously through the streets, eyes alert to every shift, every tremor, every unusual sound. The night had been restless, with distant quakes rattling structures and testing the emergency reinforcements the human had helped them install. Lyra walked beside her mother, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. The calm she had felt when the human first arrived was fading, replaced by a tense awareness that danger was still very real. The human was already awake, surveying the settlement with practiced precision. His eyes scanned every roof, every beam, every energy conduit. Each observation carried the weight of experience, and it was clear to the Kirin that he had seen countless crises before. He noticed the smallest signs of stress in the structures, the faintest tremors in the ground. To him, the settlement was a network of potential dangers, each one needing attention before it could grow into disaster. "Good morning," he said quietly without turning. His voice carried a calm authority that made the Kirin instinctively straighten their posture. Today will be harder than yesterday. The tremors are growing in frequency and intensity. If we do not act quickly, the damage will spread beyond what we can control. Weak points remain, and some systems may fail without warning. I need volunteers to accompany me. We will divide into teams and assess each sector of the settlement. Courage is necessary. Observation and action must go together. Follow my lead and stay alert. It was almost like watching a predator in the wild, but one that did not hunt, one that only sought to protect. The first major test came when they reached the central energy hub. Sparks flickered along damaged conduits and a faint smoke rose from one of the control panels. A tremor shook the building and a beam groaned under pressure. Lyra froze, fear gripping her chest. The human moved immediately, directing the Kirin workers with clear, precise instructions. "Support the beam from this side," he said. "Seal the conduits with the insulating material. Lyra, help me reroute power to the secondary line. Move quickly but carefully." She noticed how he remained calm even as sparks flew and the building groaned. He didn't panic. He didn't rush recklessly. He calculated, adapted, and acted decisively. She realized that this was what humans could do, act with courage when everything else seemed uncertain. Hours passed as they worked through the settlement. Each section revealed new challenges: weakened supports, failing energy lines, damaged water systems. Each problem required immediate attention, and the human guided them all with patience and expertise. Lyra was amazed at how quickly the Kirin adapted under his direction. Fear still lingered, but it was tempered by focus, by the shared effort of survival. Midway through the morning, a sudden tremor struck. This one was stronger than before, knocking debris from rooftops and shaking even the reinforced structures. Panic rose among the Kirin workers, some stumbling, some freezing in fear. Lyra's heart pounded. She wanted to run, but the human's voice cut through the chaos. "Focus! Look at what you can control, not what you cannot. Stabilize the beams, assist your neighbor, and stay calm." By midday, the tremors had lessened slightly, but the settlement was far from safe. The human called a meeting in the central plaza, where all the Kirin leaders had gathered. "The danger is not over," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "The tremors are spreading from an underground fault. If the pressure continues to build, parts of the settlement could collapse. We need contingency plans and evacuation routes for every district. Courage and action will save lives." The afternoon brought another tremor, this one sharp and violent. Buildings shook, debris fell, and a low rumble echoed through the streets. The human led a team to the most damaged district, Lyra following closely. They worked together, securing beams, rerouting energy, and calming panicked citizens. Lyra's hands were raw from effort, her body exhausted, but she felt a sense of accomplishment and pride she had never known. "You're doing well," the human said quietly, noticing her determination. "Keep observing, keep acting, and do not let fear control your actions." She realized that she was learning something more than emergency response. She was learning about courage, about trust, and about the unpredictable strength of humans when they chose to act with purpose. Evening fell, and the tremors became sporadic but unpredictable. The human gathered the Kirin leaders again. "We have stabilized the most critical areas for now," he said. "But the fault line is active, and we must remain vigilant. We need watch teams, reinforced structures, and communication lines open at all times. If we do this together, we can survive the worst." Humans are capable of destruction, yes, but also of protection. Courage is a choice. Compassion is a choice. And tonight you have seen that choice in action. She had seen humans not as monsters, but as beings capable of extraordinary bravery and care. And she knew now that the stories she had been taught were only half the truth. Night came again, and the settlement settled into a tense quiet. The human remained vigilant, moving from one observation post to another, checking systems, and ensuring that every precaution was in place. Lyra and Sella took shifts with him, learning and observing, gaining knowledge that could not be taught in words alone. As the stars shone above the jagged horizon, Lyra finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. The tremors had tested their strength, their courage, and their trust. They had survived, but only because they acted together. The human had not just guided them through the crisis. He had taught them that survival was about cooperation, preparation, and the courage to face the unknown. For the first time, Lyra felt a deep understanding of what humans could be. They were unpredictable, yes, but not because they were inherently dangerous. They were unpredictable because they chose their actions, and sometimes those choices could change everything. The human glanced at her, noticing the thoughtful expression on her face. "You've done well today," he said. "Remember this, fear is natural, but courage and action define what comes next. Trust in yourself, trust in your people, and trust in the actions that protect life. That is how we survive." The tremors had not ended and the danger remained, but the Kirin were no longer paralyzed by fear. They had guidance, knowledge, and courage, and in that fragile balance they found hope. The human continued his watch, silent and steady, while Lyra and Sella took their places beside him. Together they monitored the settlement, ready for whatever might come next. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt that survival was possible, not through fear, but through courage, trust, and the unpredictable strength of humanity. The tremors had not stopped. They grew stronger as the sun rose over the jagged horizon, shaking the settlement with increasing frequency. Dust filled the streets, small fires ignited where energy conduits failed, and the once familiar skyline of the Kirin settlement was beginning to collapse under invisible pressures. Panic threatened to rise, but this time, Lyra and the human were ready. The lessons of the previous days had built more than trust. They had created courage. The human moved swiftly through the central district, assessing the damage. Lyra followed closely, carrying tools and guiding Kirin workers while Sella coordinated emergency teams. Every tremor reminded them that the fault line beneath the settlement was unstable, that time was limited, and that failure could mean disaster. "Move the civilians to the reinforced shelters," the human commanded. "Teams, secure the perimeter. Every unstable structure must be supported before the next tremor hits." A massive tremor struck the settlement, far stronger than any before. Buildings swayed violently, debris tumbled from rooftops, and a section of the main market collapsed. The human dashed into the falling rubble without hesitation, lifting a beam from a trapped Kirin child and signaling to others for support. Lyra followed, helping to clear the debris and reassure the terrified citizens. Her hands were scraped, her arms burned with exertion, but she did not stop. She had learned that action, even when terrifying, was the only way to survive. Sella moved among the teams, coordinating efforts to reroute energy lines and water systems, ensuring that the survivors were safe. "We have trained for disasters," she shouted over the chaos. "But today, we are learning to survive together." She helped guide workers to stabilize a damaged bridge, rerouted power to maintain lighting in the shelters, and reassured frightened civilians. Each action she took reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the choice to act despite it. Hours passed in a blur of movement, effort, and constant danger. The settlement shook, but slowly, the coordinated actions of humans and Kirin began to stabilize the worst areas. Reinforced structures held. Fires were contained. Civilians were moved to safe zones. Lyra glanced at the human, who moved calmly through the chaos, directing, acting, and inspiring. She realized that he was not just saving the settlement, he was teaching them all what it meant to face danger with purpose. Then came the final tremor. The ground split along the fault line, sending a shockwave through the central district. Buildings swayed dangerously, and a massive support beam cracked, threatening to collapse an entire street. The human ran toward the danger without hesitation, signaling for others to clear civilians from the area. "Lyra, help me stabilize the beam," he shouted. Without thinking, Lyra joined him. Together, they used ropes, supports, and quick thinking to prevent the structure from collapsing completely. Sparks flew from nearby energy lines, dust filled the air, and the ground beneath their feet shook violently. But they worked in perfect coordination, each movement calculated, each action vital. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Lyra's mind flashed with fear, with memories of everything she had been taught about humans being dangerous. But then she saw the truth in front of her. Humans could be heroes, brave and decisive, acting to protect life even at great personal risk. She felt a surge of determination, and fear was pushed aside by action. With a final coordinated effort, the beam stabilized and the immediate danger passed. Lyra collapsed to her knees, breathing heavily, her hands trembling. The human looked at her calm but clearly exhausted. "Well done," he said quietly. "You acted bravely, you made a difference. Kirin alone cannot save the day, but together we can survive anything." The citizens slowly emerged from the shelters, shaking but alive. Murmurs of astonishment and gratitude spread among them as they noticed the human calmly overseeing the recovery. For years, they had been taught to fear humans, to see them as monsters or threats. And yet here was one who risked everything for strangers, who acted with courage, skill, and compassion. Lyra stepped forward, voice steady but emotional. You really are different, she said. I see now that humans can be heroes just like the stories we never heard. You have learned today that actions speak louder than stories, that fear can be replaced with determination, and that hope can be stronger than any tremor or disaster. They can save lives, protect the weak, and teach courage in ways we never expected. Humans, she realized, were unpredictable, but in the right hands, that unpredictability could become strength. The human addressed the gathered Kirin, his voice calm but commanding. Today, you survived because you acted, because you learned, and because you worked together. Remember this, survival is not about fear. It is about courage, preparation, and trust. You faced danger and you endured. That is what makes life worth saving. The tremors had subsided for now, but the memory of the crisis would remain. She knew that fear could return, that the fault line was still active, but she also knew something more important. They had the courage, the knowledge, and the teamwork to face whatever came next. The human looked at her, eyes steady. You have learned well, he said, and you will teach others. That is the legacy of courage and action. One human's choice to help can inspire many generations to act bravely and to trust in cooperation rather than fear. She realized that trust could be earned, courage could be taught, and that the strength of humanity was not in conquest, but in its ability to save and protect others. As the sun set behind the mountains, the settlement began the slow process of rebuilding. The tremors would return, perhaps even stronger than before, but the Kirin now had more than reinforcements and tools. They had knowledge, courage, and a human ally who had shown them the true meaning of heroism. The human watched the horizon, silent and vigilant. Lyra and Sella worked alongside the citizens, coordinating repairs and distributing supplies. The settlement was still fragile, but it was alive, and hope had taken root where fear had once dominated. For the first time, Lyra understood the full truth of the stories she had never been told. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were also capable of greatness. They could save lives, inspire courage, and teach lessons that would last for generations. The human who had entered their home, once feared, had proven that actions were far more powerful than fear, and that humanity's strength lay not in domination, but in protection, sacrifice, and hope. As the night fell and the stars shone brightly over the jagged terrain, the settlement was quiet but alive. Lyra looked at the human, gratitude and admiration shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. The human who saved us, and the lessons we have learned, they will guide us forever." And in doing so, he had changed the way an entire people saw the universe, showing them that even in the darkest moments, hope, bravery, and trust could prevail. The tremors had passed for now, but the legacy of that day would endure far longer. Humanity had proven itself not as a threat, but as a protector, a teacher, and a force for life. And for the Kirin, and for Lyra, that truth would never be forgotten.